We want to bring in Robert James, a former DeKalb County District Attorney, joining us now with some perspective on all this. Mr. James, thank you for your time. Let me just get your initial reaction to the jury coming back in under 2 hours with guilty on all charges. All right, we're going to work to get our audio secured there with Mr. James and get back to him in just a moment.
Yeah, looking forward to his perspective on a number of points, to your point of how quickly that the jury deliberated and came back with this verdict, but also just what this could mean for future cases. This is, as you said, unprecedented. A father who is now facing at max more than 200 years in prison, 27 charges. It could have been 29, but there were some who chose not to testify, so 27 charges. But the most serious would be murder in the second degree, is something we have not seen when it comes to a parent being held culpable for the actions of their child.
Also, what does this mean for the case of his son moving forward, Colin Gray, who right now undergoing some mental evaluations to determine whether he is mentally capable to stand trial. So let's get back to Mr. James now, former DeKalb County District Attorney. Mr. James, thank you for your time on a big morning here. We'll just start with your reaction to hearing that the jury came back in under 2 hours, guilty on all charges for Colin Gray.
Well, that's fast, right? You don't normally see juries come back that fast in trials that last more than a day or a half day, just because of the sheer volume of evidence people have to review before they make a decision. So they apparently had their minds made up when they went back there.
For you, in terms of moving forward, we keep talking about this being a first of its kind case in Georgia, but really one the country hasn't seen to this degree. Even the estranged wife of Colin Gray, Marcy Gray, in court, it talked about how she had Googled Jennifer and James Crumbly, the parents in Michigan who were convicted in 2024 of failing to secure a firearm, ignoring warning signs in another mass school shooting. From a legal perspective, what changes after this verdict today in your mind to potential cases moving forward when it comes to a parent's culpability in the actions of a child?
Well, the bar just got lower, right? We've never seen the law used in this way before. And so as a former prosecutor, you've never really imagined being able to charge parents in this way. And so ultimately the precedent's been set. The bar is lower. My suspicion and belief is that this is going to play out in front of the Georgia Supreme Court because it expands the doctrine of parental responsibility in a way that we've not seen before, and so they're going to have the ultimate pass on it.
Can you tell me how exactly it would get all the way up to the higher courts? What are some of the appeals that we would see between now and then, and how long could that take?
Well, you're going to see appeals, perhaps to the Court of Appeals, perhaps to the Supreme Court, depending on what the issue is, right? That happens pretty fast in terms of when the appeal happens or when it's filed, usually within about 30 days or so of a conviction. There may be a motion for a new trial before it goes there, but I would expect that the defense lawyers will seek redress with the appellate courts. And then ultimately the Supreme Court's going to have to decide whether or not they want to expand the doctrine of parental responsibility in Georgia this far, because it really is a major shift in public policy.
Real quick, as we wrap up here, two questions. How should we be viewing sentencing? He's facing up to 180 years. What's next with that? And then what's next with the son's case? How are his attorneys viewing this conviction this morning?
Well, I'll start with the second question that you asked, which was the son's case. I would expect that there's going to be a pretty strong and a robust argument, about maybe diminished capacity, mental health issues. I think that if I were his defense lawyer, I would be pointing to perhaps the dysfunctional upbringing, the home environment and how that's affected his psyche and him mentally. Obviously, an expert has to say that ultimately, not just a lawyer. In terms of sentencing, he's going to be brought back before the court. This gentleman that just was convicted, and there will be arguments about, the amount of time that is appropriate. You can, bet money, right, that the prosecution's going to ask for a lot of time. They're going to want to send a message. And obviously, the defense lawyers are going to offer evidence and mitigation and ask for leniency. And that'll be interesting to watch how that plays out in the courtroom.
Mr. James, how unusual in your mind is it that we have the parents' trial before the child who's accused? If you just look at this, in a layman's term, it seems like it's the reverse order of what you would expect.
Yeah, it is the reverse order of what you would expect. The reason it's not extraordinary is because everybody expects that the young person will, admit that he actually committed these murders, these crimes. But there's some sort of, I won't call it justification, but mitigation, whether it's mental health issues or, not guilty by reason of insanity. We don't expect him to come in and say he didn't do it. Now, if he were going to come into court and say he didn't do it, he being the young man, then it would be highly unusual to convict somebody for helping someone do something where the other individual has not been convicted of doing yet. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's unusual, but I wouldn't call it extraordinary.
Mr. James, I have one other question, just because you have such a unique and insightful perspective. As you were following this trial, what were the moments from your perspective that stood out to you as the most impactful to get us to where we are today, a conviction on 27 counts for a father of an accused school shooter?
Yeah, well, I'll summarize it, right? All the moments that really pointed towards the father having knowledge that this young man was dangerous, right? The mother's testimony, the testimony of the sister, other family members, everything that pointed towards you knew about his issues, but you also knew enough to fully appreciate that he was dangerous and that he was going to do something. And if the case survives on appeal, I think it will be narrow, but it will survive for those reasons.
Robert James, former DeKalb County District Attorney. Sir, thank you for your time and analysis this morning.
Thank you for having me.
We're back in just a few minutes. Breaking news, Colin Gray found guilty on all charges.